is. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for coming to our and quarterly UTRU meeting. We like to have these. We did miss our last one for those of you that are wondering why they didn't see anything a couple months ago. Basically, it was the summer. We all kind of were off in the world, and by the time we realized that the situation or that we had a meeting coming up, it was too late. So we apologize for that. We haven't had a meeting since February. So we've got a little bit of catching up to do, but by way of introduction, I just want to start off and go over today's agenda. First of all, my name is Curtis Haring. I am the Executive Director of the Utah Transit Riders Union, or UTRU. And yeah, we've got a couple of speakers with us today. I'll go through this agenda in just a moment, but yeah, we're going to be talking a little bit about what we've been up to. I've been up to as the Executive Director. We're also going to be talking about one of our programs, one of our initiatives that we've got coming up, the Transit Imagined Initiative. We've got some maps and ideas and discussions around that. Also, UTA has released its 2050 long range plan, and we have representatives from UTA here to kind of talk about that, talk about the public input, talk about what they would like to do as far as transit is concerned in the state of Utah, more specifically along the Wasatch Front and Wasatch Back. We also, you may have heard that there's discussion about expanding I-15 from Salt Lake City up to Farmington. And so we have people from UDOT and the Wasatch Front Regional Council here to discuss that. And then finally, we wanted to talk about some of the impacts of that discussion, as well as just impacts of being on the west side of Salt Lake City specifically, but just what the west side in general. What are their transit needs? How can people get more involved? And well, just what's going on over there. And then finally, we want to do a call to action and adjourn, get you on with the rest of your Saturday. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started. First of all, I know this is our president, John Pearson. He is not on the call right now. I've sent him a text message, haven't heard back. So I'm going to take over for him to discuss just kind of some of the things that we want to talk about as a welcome. So first of all, I do want to welcome our various speakers as we're going through. But as far as what we've been off to, some of the exciting things that we've had going on since the last time we met in February is we really have started to build up our chapters in UTRU. So for example, we have UTRU students, and since the last time we spoke, we were able to get a South Salt Lake and Sugar House chapter off of the ground. And so very exciting stuff there. These chapters are doing things like Adopt a Stop, where they can basically pick a individual stop, make sure that it is well maintained, well taken care of, and just demonstrate it. At the same time, we also have these chapters doing things such as identifying bicycle stops, or excuse me, bicycle racks that could possibly go up in certain locations. They are also working with their local community councils to make sure that they talk to and reach out to those councils to voice their opinion when transit studies are coming up. For example, 2100 South in South Salt Lake was something that, and is something that those chapters are addressing and talking about in those local areas. So we want to encourage people to continue in those chapters or start setting up their own chapters. We want to have chapters that are based off of geography. We want chapters that are based off of common interests, so like ski bus, or people who don't own a car, like are completely dependent on transit and use transit. Women, minorities, if you have a certain special interest, if you like bicycle riding, if you like using transit to get to the mountains, or the ski bus. We want to encourage people to start doing that and continue to push the chapter systems out, because it is a way for us to really continue to just grow the organization. We as UTRU cannot be everywhere at once, and we recognize that, and that is why we are pushing for more chapters. Also, as a reminder, we are a nonprofit organization. We need to make sure that we do have help from our members. We don't ask for a lot, but we do ask that if you are a member we hope that you consider paying dues. Dues-paying members have the ability to vote on where UTRU should go next, what issues we should be talking about, what issues we should be tackling. We're starting to experiment with a new model now that we've gotten a little bit larger. We're basically, and I'll talk about this in a moment as far as some of the things we're working on, but we're experimenting with a new model where people can actually just chime in on a forums post or submit questions, comments, complaints, concerns to us. We as UTRU can kind of organize that and have our members vote on which ones are more important, or which ones they would like us to focus on, I should say, and then have our board decide, okay, this is our top priority for this area, this is our top priority for this area, but making sure that the members are involved. Members also vote for people who are on the board. So that is another important aspect of that as well. And so dues, as far as what that actually costs, we try to make it pretty reasonable. We make it $5 a month if you are able to do that. Basically, the cost for you to ride transit in a day. So, for example, I live in South Jordan. If I worked up into Ogden, that would be about $8 a day, roughly, for me. So my dues would be $8 a month. It's an honor system thing. It's mostly that we want to make sure that we continue to have some of the funds to help pay for me, help pay for supplies and outreach and all of those sorts of things. And then in return, you become a dues-paying member that's able to really guide where UTRU is going. And then finally, kind of related to that, we want you to come to our upcoming annual convention. We will be holding it on October 21st. It's the third Saturday. So whatever that third Saturday is, I believe it's the 21st. Right now, it's going to be virtual. We're seeing if we can also secure an in-person location for people who want to participate in that as well. But it's an opportunity for people to come in, join the board, join individual chapters, find out what's going on, have a chance to interact. So that's kind of the general welcome. Again, we'll be going over to our speakers in just a moment, but I wanted to welcome everyone. And this is the awkward part where John was supposed to pass over to me, so I'm going to pass over to myself and just give you a general update as what I, as the executive director, have been up to over the past 6 months. And if people have questions, or feel free to ask, or they can always email me at the end. I'll be sure to put that information in there as well. But yeah, my name again, Curtis Haring, Executive Director of UTRU. And let's go ahead and get started. Some of the things that we've got going on since last February. So we did create a special section on our website for projects and initiatives to give you a better idea of what we are working on. So, for example, we have launched Transit Imagined. Chris, one of our co-founders, as well as our treasurer, Chris Stout, he'll be speaking in just a moment on some of the details on that. But so I'm not going to go too much into that, but it's an exciting new project. It's an exciting idea that we want to start moving forward on. We also started doing current and proposed transit projects page. We'll talk about that in just a moment as well. We have started the South Salt Lake and Sugar House chapter, as I mentioned, and very excited, we started to receive some funding for our CAT program, our Community Advocacy Training for Transit program. I've got a slide coming up on that in just a moment. But those are some of the bigger things. Some of the smaller things is we continue to make inroads into various community councils. We continue to reach out and talk to various organizations that are transit-oriented to help find commonplace interactions, commonplace ways that we can work together and with each other to help advocate for transit. We really want to make sure that we are doing that. So that's a really big, broad overview. I've done a whole lot more than that, but I don't think people want to hear about I applied for X grant or I did Y meeting with this person. But I do want to talk about the CAT program. This is something I'm very excited about personally. This is something that I think has a lot of potential for UTRU going forward as being an advocacy organization. So basically, the CAT program came out of the idea that people don't necessarily know how to advocate for transit, how to talk to a lawmaker, how to talk to a community council. Some people don't even know who those people are, right? And so the CAT initiative is broadly speaking, teaching people how to find the decision makers, and then more specifically, how to advocate for transit by giving some base knowledge about things like zoning laws, how transportation policy is decided, who pays for those things, when and where can the public get involved. And so, yeah, you can kind of see the blurb here, but basically it's designed to increase community involvement. We've targeted 15 communities up and down the Wasatch Front that we want to speak to that are historically underserved by transit, either from just a general physical sense or from an economic sense. In other words, the buses and trains don't necessarily go where the jobs are. You know, a prime example is there's no real way to get from West Valley to the airport, despite the airport being a very obvious economic draw. So yeah, our intention is now that this is funded, we're going to start building the curriculum. We're going to start reaching out, and we are going to start having these meetings in these communities. We hope to have at least 15, as I said. Depending on funding, we want to circle back around. We want to come back to those communities. And we want to identify new communities as well that we can reach out to. But you can kind of see the list of places that we've already targeted, all along the Wasatch Front and out in Tooele as well. Yeah, and if you want more information about that, I encourage you guys to take a look at utru.org/cat-initiative, and that is cat with 2 T's. So yeah, take a look at that. I'd love to hear from you. Finally, I just want to talk a little bit about some of the upcoming activities. I kind of hit on this already, but yes, we do have our annual convention in October coming up. This will mainly be an opportunity to elect board members and have a general discussion about where UTRU should be going over the next year and a half, 2 years, and start setting those ideas into motion. Also, we are actively working, like I said, on creating forum posts. So an opportunity for people to get involved and talk about some of the issues, concerns, ideas that they have for their various transit organizations up and down the Wasatch Front, or excuse me, I shouldn't even say that, all across the state of Utah. I just say that because the UTA section obviously is kind of the big kahuna, but a lot of people don't know that Vernal has a public transit system. A lot of people don't know necessarily that Cedar City has one. Some of you might know Logan has one, but yeah, in St. George as well, Park City and the Wasatch Back, they all have transit systems too. And we want to make sure that we provide an area and a forum for all transit riders to talk about what is concerning them, what their ideas are, and then we as an organization, like I said before, are able to take that, go to those organizations, try to find solutions to those problems, whatever they may be, and make sure that it is driven from the bottom up. And again, we also will be doing that. Starting off, I was working on it yesterday. We should hopefully be getting that kicked off pretty soon. And then last thing I want to talk about is the 7-day challenge. This is going to be coming up. We're shooting for March of next year. But UTRU actually did something similar back in like 2015, 2016, where we will be challenging with the help of specifically our UTRU students chapter. We will be reaching out to the policymakers that actually make the budgets, make the decisions. We'll be reaching out to the UTA board. We'll be reaching out, hopefully, to those other outlying transit organizations, and basically telling them, hey, we are offering the 7-day challenge where we are going to ask you to ride the system that you are funding, ride the system that you have your hands in and control and can make decisions about, and then let's get your thoughts on that. Right? Now that you actually ride the system, because most of the decision makers don't actually take transit. It's an obvious kind of problem, right? If you don't take the system that you're controlling, that you don't necessarily know what's going on. So we're going to be working on that coming up to encourage policymakers to be part of this 7-day challenge and then have them report back. So that is all for me. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand off to our co-founder and treasurer, Chris Stout. He's going to talk a little bit more about Transit Imagined and that project. So let me go ahead and click over. Chris, let me know if you can't share your screen.
Yep, give me just a second here. I always have issues when I'm doing this. If I get if I cut myself off, I'll be back. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
There we got you.
We can see that. Great. So my name is Chris Stout. I am a co-founder and currently treasurer of Utah Transit Riders Union. You know, the issue that I always talk about is service, and my one of the reasons why I started the union along with Greg Scott. It's been almost 10 years now. It was basically how, and this goes back in eons ago now, but we started the organization based on a trip that lawmakers and Utah Transit Authority executives took to Switzerland to find out about cog railroads as a possibility up the canyons, and what they said right before they got on the plane was, the bus system is our priority. We want to expand the bus service. And then they promptly all got on an airplane and flew to Switzerland to look at the cog railroads. And so the focus, our focus has always been trying to get better service, trying to get things better within the transit system. So from the very beginning, we've talked about a guaranteed service, about buses should run 20 hours a day. They should run 15 minutes, and there's different areas where that works. Some areas it doesn't work. But over the years, basically, we've come to the conclusion that there are more potential transit riders than service, than what's actually out there. And so this Transit Imagined is basically, the bottom line is, or what we're talking about is, more buses, more trains, all the time, everywhere. Um, and that approach is somewhat different than what the planning agencies take. It's somewhat different than what some of our lawmakers take, and it's certainly different than what UTA, at least currently UTA, is providing, and then some of the other minor agencies. So one of the things that we've been doing over years is myself and others have talked about what a transit system should look like. What do the users really want? What makes it convenient for people to use? Why are people not going to use a flex route? Why are people going to use a train? Why are people going to use a bus? Are people willing to walk 20 minutes to wait for an hour bus? We know those things don't happen. We know that with transit, stops that are located within 10 minutes walking distance and who have a frequent service are going to be used. And so this system that we've come up with, and again, this is Transit Imagined. These maps that I'm going to present might not necessarily be what we ultimately will advocate for, but the totality of the system needs to be one where users can make connections, and those connections are going to be at work, they're going to be at play, they're going to be at home, shopping, special events, going to a football game, going to the airport. And we'll talk a little bit. Curtis mentioned there's no easy way to get from the west side to the airport. And the airport is a big economic center. And then, of course, we've talked about the inland port. The inland port's going to be areas where there's opportunities there. But the basic issue that we have is that there is a disconnect between why we really need transit and where transit is going. You're going to hear a lot today about the 2050 plan, the plan that UTA is their long-term strategic goals. You're going to hear about the I-15 expansion. Well, these are all things that, from a transit user's point of view, especially me, I currently gave up my car. I'm almost a year now without my car, and I use transit solely. And I'm a professional. I'm an accountant. I have an accounting business. And I work at home, and so my need to go places is primarily for shopping and for leisure. but definitely not for work. And as we move forward, we're going to find that climate change is a big problem, and that perhaps expanding the freeway with $1.6 billion might not be the best use of funds. And so the Transit Imagine project is going to be our way to kind of step into the discussion to say, this is what we really should be doing. And there's going to be benefits along the way. So just really quick, we'll talk a little bit about what the bus service, what we're talking about with bus service. So we're saying that the microtransit, the on-demand services are great, but to be honest with you, I feel that presents kind of it's a, we can't really afford to have a bus. People don't use it, but what we've determined is that people will use the transit system if they can get to it and it's frequent. So we've kind of broken it down into no more flex buses. The type of service for the microtransit is still there, but we want to expand it so that it's pretty much everywhere. Everybody has the ability to use the microservice if they need it. But basically, we want to break it down into a frequent bus, which will run anywhere from 8 to 15 minutes, and then a regular bus that will run anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes, and then an hourly bus that runs 60 minutes in addition to limited bus service. Those would be, peak service, or perhaps they only run Monday through Friday. But we're talking about an expansion overall of the system so that the buses will actually connect to stations. Rail stations need to have bus access, because without bus access, we don't have those connections we need to go from work to play to shopping and back and forth. So some of what you'll see this map here, which is a vast expansion of what services that we have today, because essentially what we've done is we've pulled directly out of the South Valley and said, the only transit options are basically the three red line rail stations and microtransit. That's all we can afford. That's all people will use. But I feel that a more robust system like this will increase transit users. What we're doing is we're creating connections. The connections from the local to the transit stations, like Daybreak and South Jordan and Old Bingham. And one thing interesting, so there is a huge, in this area right here, there is a huge industrial area. There's a lot of workers there, but there's currently no bus service. You can't get from here to there. So as you can see, all of these different stations now have at least one transit connection. Most of them have two or three. But that's part of what the Transit Imagined is. It's about connections. It's about getting bus riders to train stations, from train station to train station, and then back on the bus. So one thing that I'm gonna move up here, and this is one point that Curtis had mentioned about getting to the airport. So yes, we have the green line that makes this meander into Salt Lake and then to the airport, but there's not a real connection between the west side and the airport. So one of the solutions that we came up with, and this has been put out there for years, and that is a 56 West frequent service bus that basically would connect everything from the red line up to the airport, and it would be 15-minute service, and would run at least 6 days a week at 15-minute service, with 30-minute service on Sundays. But the one thing that you'll notice on this map is that as you add in more routes and more service, it gets crowded. And what happens on this map when it's crowded is that people are actually going to use it. There's more connections for a transit rider to use. One thing that I have been a big proponent of is that over the years, and this is true after COVID, is that we're actually seeing a decrease in service in a lot of areas, and the coverage is decreasing without a corresponding uptick in transit users. So what happened here with COVID basically is that, well, two things: people stopped going to work, and then the inflation hit, and then we had to cut back all of the routes because we couldn't afford to hire drivers. And this actually impacts the transit user very, very, very greatly. It's an issue that while we've cut back, the average transit user now is spending more time to use transit. So we talk about the bottlenecks on I-15, and we talk, hey, there's going to be an increase in 10 minutes over the next 30 years for traffic getting into Salt Lake City. Well, when I go to the airport, I used to be able to get there in about 45 minutes using at the time what was 45 and into Murray and then to the airport. But now this last trip I took me an hour and a half to get back from the airport because there was no connection, no 15-minute connection for me to get on at Murray Central. Normally I would go from my house here on 45 to Murray Central to downtown, pick up the green line and then go in. But since we reduced the 45 back to 30 minutes, that doesn't exist. I can't get there from here. So now I have to take the 209 all the way into town. I have to go up through the avenues, and then I have to hop on at the North Temple to get to the airport. And that's about an hour and a half. So transit users are being impacted because of the reduction of service. And this is something that the transit imagined basically is covering. We're talking about adding more hourly routes. We're talking about more connections to stations. We're talking about a better influx of jobs on the west side, so that people can make those connections. They can go from home to work, from work to shopping, from shopping back to the home. And we're going to be doing this for all the systems. So everywhere that there is a system, we're going to say, this is what we believe based on our conversations with transit riders that is actually needed. And we're not constrained by budgets or by saying, well, this just doesn't work because there's not going to be enough people to ride it. Our chief thing is that if we build it, they will come. And this type of system, my guess is that we could expect at least a 15% increase in ridership in the UTA system once these are adopted. And the cost, there's going to be a cost to it, but as we move forward, as climate change becomes an issue, we need to get people out of cars. We have to make it so that people make these connections and it's easier to get out of the cars. I had a conversation with an individual who lives basically up in the foothill areas, and he works out here on Third West. There's no way conveniently for him to get to his work. Again, his transfers are an hour and a half to go this distance. So what we're trying to do is make it so that the again, more buses, more trains everywhere all the time. Does anybody have any questions on that?
Yeah, I mean, it is a big project, and it's a big idea. It is a big step forward for what we feel transit should be in the state of Utah, and it is for the state of Utah. Like Chris said, we are going to be going into all of the systems. We may even discuss areas that might benefit from getting a system in the first place. But that being said, we know it's going to be expensive what we are proposing. We know it is a big ask, and we know that we're probably not going to get everything that we want. But that being said, and I feel bad now that I'm going to pass it off to UTA in just a moment. But that being said, we really do want to make sure that we're providing that guidepost, providing something to aspire to. It is transit imagined, after all. And so, yeah, I look forward to continuing working on this and continuing to advocate for it. I think it will be a good project to have as a North Star. And look out for more information on it. We will get maps up and we will get all of those things out for people to look at. All right. Well, like I said, I do feel a little bad now. I am going to pass off to Alex Brem, who is with UTA, to specifically talk about the 2050 plan that UTA is putting together about current and future transit. So, Alex, I will go ahead and pass off to you if you want to share your screen and do what you want to do there.
Sure. Thanks, Curtis. Yeah, I have a presentation. Apologies, some of you may have already seen this presentation at one of the open houses or events that we have, but I'll go through that quickly. I'd like to be sure to give time for questions and comments. Appreciate all the discussion. As someone who primarily uses transit as my own way to get around, and I certainly appreciate the discussion. There's a lot of talk about things like increased frequency and additional service in this plan. So with that, I'll just walk through this fairly quickly and leave some time for questions. So yes, we are working on UTA Moves 2050, our long-range transit plan. And so we're looking at focusing on and responding and planning for the future needs of the communities we serve. And our draft vision that's online right now includes lots of ideas, not all of which are constrained by funding at this point. That will happen by the end of the year. Just walk through where we are in terms of schedule. We've done some plan definition, some outreach, needs assessment, and developed the proposed draft vision that's out to the public right now online. And then we will be constraining that vision with or assumed financial constraints and have a first version of this document complete by the end of the year. Key point is that it is just the first version. This is a living document that will continue to be updated over time as things change. How do we come to the vision? We've developed goals-based evaluation criteria. We've looked at existing plans that are already there. One thing that is guiding very strongly, at least this first vision, is that our MPO partners, Wasatch Front Regional Council and Mountain Land Association of Governments, have long-range plans that include transit projects that we are including, and then also existing plans from UTA, and we are also gathering feedback from the public. All that will go into a prioritized list of projects. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but part of what we're doing is thinking about what strategies work for different parts of the region. This was mentioned earlier, right? Like where does frequent bus make sense? Where does an on-demand or innovative mobility solutions type solution make sense? And where does rail or some other solution make sense? We've got 4 different things that we're working on. We need to maintain the system, right? It's not the exciting part, but in order for transit to work, we need facilities. We need to make sure the rails work. We need to make sure the trains are upkept. We're looking at things to make the system work better. We want to expand the frequent service network, and we want to serve new growth areas. In terms of maintaining the system, that's making sure things are working. Efforts to make the bus fleet go green. It was climate change and those kind of impacts were mentioned earlier. So we're certainly cognizant of that. We have facilities we need to maintain. We need to have a workforce and all the other things that go along with that. So we know that fast and reliable service is important. We know that we need to think about capital improvements and improving technologies to help transit work better in the future. Those are all focuses of the plan. So I know this was mentioned in the Imagine Transit. I'm sorry, I might get it wrong. It's the plan that your team is working on here. We are cognizant of that as well. We are looking to improve and expand frequency across the entire system, including front runner, tracks, bus. And when we talk about bus, we're also talking about corridor improvements to speed up and make the system more reliable, and then right-of-way preservation for potential future expansion. We're looking to operate most routes on weekends and expand Sunday service, extend evening and early morning service. As I mentioned, upgrade frequency. We want to expand new routes into new areas where there's growth. We want to use our innovative mobility solutions to provide additional temporal and geographic coverage, and a new service that we're talking about, which is a sort of regional bi-directional all-day service to places like Tooele, Brigham City, and down to Payson and southern Utah County. So I'm going to walk through this real quickly. This is all online, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but we're having additional improvements across the entire service area. So that includes the northern region or central region and in Utah County. We have a set of goals that we'll be evaluating and using to prioritize improvements that tie into UTA's strategic goals. That includes access to transit, ridership, increased frequency and span, cost effectiveness, generating economic return, and access to folks who have high need for transit. One thing to be aware of is that there's other concurrent processes happening now that we are not focusing on as much because there are other efforts going on. That includes the little Cottonwood Canyons and ski service and the Point of the Mountain Transit study that's occurring right now. As I mentioned, we're in the outreach period that's continuing through the end of the until the end of September. And essentially, we'd love to hear your feedback. You can visit rideUTA.com/LRTP or use any of the QR codes linked below. Would love to see what things you think are more important, less important, what you think is good, what you think is missing. And with that, I will stop sharing and see if folks have questions.
I've got a question. I have questions all the time, so we could,
Okay, great.
So
love questions.
And I kind of mentioned this. I mean, I've ridden the flex routes, and I mean, they're good routes until somebody wants to make a deviation, and then I end up missing my connection. And I mean, I have not tried the micro transit. I have not yet done the on demand. I know Curtis had, and I know there's so we have some issues in that. But can you kind of explain where the flex buses and where the on demand actually fit into here? Because I mean, my preference would be to kind of ditch the flex routes, and I mean, the smaller buses are fine and more of a fixed route, but talk about the idea of the complementing the on-demand with what is actually a flex bus right now. Is there a plan to remove flex routes, more on-demand? Kind of talk a little bit about that, if you would.
Sure. We are looking at, so the on-demand, or we're kind of leaving it open as innovative mobility areas, because the on-demand service is still in a early stage. So it's got a very tight area of success between not enough people using it, too many people using it. We are looking at potential areas. If you look on the online map, there's quite a lot of areas that are being considered for the innovative mobility solutions, which could include either on-demand or partnerships with like Lyft or Uber or something like that. But we are looking at that as a way to bridge that gap for both areas where land use is less supportive of frequent fixed route service, and to some of those kind of temporal solutions where we could get additional service late at night, early in the morning, where there's not enough demand. Yeah,
so where are we getting more demand than what we thought? What areas are actually, where is that actually happening at?
So there's 4 zones right now: Southwest Salt Lake County, Tooele County, portions of Tooele County, South Davis County, and then the west side of Salt Lake City. Southwest Salt Lake County is getting a lot of demand, and we're looking at that was the initial pilot, and that's where we're looking to potentially expand. And the west side of Salt Lake City is in cases exceeding demand. The challenge that we have, a challenge that occurs with the west side of Salt Lake City, is that ideally that's a place with enough demand that we would run more fixed route service. Part of the challenge there is those historic barriers. There's a lot of at-grade rail crossings that make it difficult for us to run a bus. You can't effectively run a bus, say at Second South, and not know if you're going to get stuck because a UP train is sitting on the tracks.
Yeah, exactly. The west side train problem. Okay. Well, and that kind of that I appreciate that, because I kind of thought that the Southwest Valley would probably had more demand and therefore probably needs more fixed route because there's nothing down there now. So anyway,
sorry, I was just going to say, on the plan, we do have some, a few routes running in Southwest Salt Lake County in the UTA Moves 2050 plan. So.
Awesome. I do want to cut off questioning because one of our speakers is going to have to be off by 11:30. So Alex, I'll give you just kind of one last chance to wrap up. And how can people get a hold of you?
The best way, you're welcome to reach out to me if you've got questions about the plan. LRTP@rideuta.com, and visit our website and go check out the plan. Also a link to the plan information in the chat. Thanks for the opportunity.
Great. Absolutely. And we'll be sure to share that out with everybody as well. Okay, like I said, we do have kind of a bit of a time constraint. We want to respect all of our speakers here. So I did want to hand off to UDOT and the Wasatch Front Regional Council and all of everybody that's kind of involved with I-15 expansion. I believe we've got, I lost my list. I apologize. I know that we've got Shane, Dan, I believe Matt, and Lauren here to kind of talk about the plan a little bit. And so I wanted to go ahead and pass off to you all. Let me stop sharing my window and taking it from there.
Thanks, Curtis. So my name is Shane Marshall. I work for Horrocks Engineers. Our UDOT folks are unable to join today. So you get Dan and I from the consultant side. Matt Carter can answer any questions about a train anywhere in Utah, specifically FrontRunner. And then I think we have someone from WFRC that can help as well. But we're just going to walk through quickly where we're at with this I-15 study, and then we'll go from there. I think one thing to point out as I start to share my screen is that we are a little bit, all right, get this out of the way. We are a little bit premature on this discussion. We have a big launch. So can you all see a blue screen? Yes, Dan, thank you. So we are a little bit early. The end of this month, we'll release the draft EIS. We'll have a bunch of information on it, a good chance to comment and a review of where we've been and what is going to be recommended or what has been recommended today. But we're here today to say, come and give us some comments and we'll walk through where we've been and where we're headed. So with that, today's topic is our process and the draft release. And Dan's going to walk through some of the public comment opportunities that we've had over the past, almost 2 years now. Dan's got COVID, so if he can't talk or he runs out of the room, I'll try to take it up from there. We started this process with looking at quality of life throughout the corridor, really focusing on these 4 components of quality of life: better mobility, good health, connected communities, and strong economy. This really became what is our purpose and need for this project. And I think as we walked through today's this meeting today, it was interesting. We start with a very high level aspirational goals and Transit Imagine, move into more of that planning level with Alex and the UTA's transit move. And now we're going to be talking about a very project specific outcome of all of that effort that's gone before. One thing that we continue to point out with this project, it is one piece of the Utah Transportation Plan, something that WFRC and UDOT and UTA have come together to put together. So what we did is we took everything that is in the plan and we assumed that it would be built. So Front Runner was both double tracked and electrified in the plan. Everything that Alex talked about today, everything that's in the plan we assumed was built. Every transit, every trail, every highway was built. We pulled out I-15 and said, okay, what are the needs now? If everything was built but I-15, what are the needs on I-15? And that's where we started. So oftentimes we get questions about why not transit instead of I-15? Well, the fact is it's both transit and I-15. It couldn't happen. The long-term demand couldn't be met with just transit alone or highways alone. It takes both of those. And that's what the regional transportation plan shows. So we wanted to be very fair and say, okay, if everything's built, then what? We also looked at what's going on out there today. There's a lot of aging infrastructure. The bridges are in disrepair. There's some pavement on I-15 it's showing its signs of life, and it's time to replace it. The travel time, one of the things that UDOT looks at consistently is what kind of travel time do you have on I-15 today? You can experience about 18 to 19 minutes if you go all the way, the full extent of the project from Forest South all the way up to Farmington. But in the year 2050, assuming I-15 is not built, but everything else is built, you end up with a 66 to 55-minute commute. So that's assuming all the transit improvements that are in place are in place. Moving on to safety, there are some safety issues on the southern end of this corridor that, with some curves and some small shoulders that are really starting to stand out. So we wanted to find a solution for that, as well as the interchanges at each location. And you at times experience backing on I-15, which creates more safety problems. So we looked at what are our interchange needs from now until the future. Also looked at limited connections through and along I-15. There's a picture, the third picture from the left shows a little plywood. It's a sidewalk that some folks have built from a highway over to a Front Runner stop in Davis County. So we wanted to fix things like that, look into things like that, and say where are those connections limited, and how do we make those connections better? All of those 4 things resulted in our purpose and need. So improve safety, better connections, strengthen the economy, and improve mobilities for all users, not just for those on I-15, but those that go through I-15 that are on bikes or on pets or whatever they might be. We want to make sure that those are looked at equally with the traffic that is also on I-15. As we move through the process, we had a range of alternatives that we looked at. 2 of them that we focused on and evaluated further were these that show on the screen. And one of them, the bottom one, will be dropped out and we'll only be moving forward with the top one. So it is 5 lanes, 5 general purpose lanes, and 1 HOT lane. So it's 5+1 is what we're calling it. 6 total transportation lanes with some shoulders. The cross section looks almost identical to the cross section in Utah County, where they have 5+1 as well. It's at about 226 feet wide. One thing that we get asked a lot about is where does this fit in the context of what's out there today? If you're in the Salt Lake area, down by 4th, 5th, and 6th South, there's such a wide median that the majority of this construction fits within the current footprint. There's a little bit of work on the west side. There is a very large street that's on the west side that we take up about 5 feet of that. But other than that, we're in the current footprint of I-15, and we don't have any long-term impacts to the housing community along there. There's no relocations in the Salt Lake section of I-15. So we've really done a lot of work. We heard loud and clear as we talked to the public about don't impact that community, don't impact that community. So this cross section was shrunken, and we limit that impact significantly. So what happens if we do implement this project? We talked about the travel time, which is the chart on the left, 18, 19-minute travel times today, turning into 50 to 66 minutes in the future. If this project was implemented, it would drop that time down from 50 to 28 minutes and from 66 minutes down to 30. You can see we're not trying to get back to the existing conditions today. We're trying to add a benefit in sort of the context of the whole thing, making sure that there is opportunity to ride transit and other things like that. So it's not, the intention isn't to come back to the existing state, it is to make a better improvement than over the no-bill. The chart on the right is locations where we have made improvements to the walking and biking facilities out there. One of the, as you saw in the purpose and need, was to really enhance the connected communities portion of this. And along the corridor, we try to create opportunities to get through I-15, make it more permeable, and get to transit opportunities, both east side and west side. This is just a big picture of all of the interchange options we looked at. At each location, there will be some sort of change to the interchanges. At the 6th North in Salt Lake, a significant change from what's out there today, a much smaller footprint, far more walkable amenities to get people through I-15 and across I-15. So a much different look along the corridor, with moving pedestrians, bicycles, and vehicles equally weighted throughout the corridor. Dan, do you want to take over how we looked at public involvement?
Yep. Hey, everybody, I'm going to just start off on the first couple of slides and just talk a little bit about what we've done, and then I'll transition into what's coming up and how to participate, like Shane mentioned early on. One of the things that we tried to do throughout the corridor so that we could get good quality face time with a diversity of folks is we used what we call local area working groups. So we had three different sections of the entire study area, the corridor, where we broke out into these local area working groups. And in those, we tried to get a good cross-section of residents, business owners, people from various incomes, people from different ethnic and diversity of backgrounds, also making sure we had a good distribution of people of all ages, people with disabilities, youth, and linguistically isolated as well. So it was, and we really have had great participation from these local area working groups. We've been able to meet with them at each of the key milestones since the very beginning of the study, and this group has been super helpful in helping us understand and hear. Like Shane mentioned, the alternatives really are reflective of the things that we've heard from the community, and local area working groups are one of the keys to us helping to do that effectively. Another thing that we did was you can't do a project like this without doing some good old traditional open houses. So we actually did virtual open houses as well. And then we had 2 in-person open houses. And those were really well attended. A lot of great, you can see from these pictures, a lot of good participation, a lot of people attended. We held those in the second week of November of this last year. We had one of the things that we can touch on real quick is just one of the things we did to help promote all of that is that we placed hundreds of flyers throughout the corridor, a lot of just on the ground, getting out and hanging flyers, both in English and in Spanish. We put up lawn signs throughout the corridor to let people know. And then we also did just a lot of paid social media, 10,000 mailers we mailed out to people throughout the corridor. A lot of things just try to boost and get people, any path we could find to get people informed and involved. Another thing you can see from this slide, just that we had input from 60 locations. with those public information posters. There was 31 presentations, so that includes making presentations to city councils, civic groups, anybody that we could meet with. We went and made presentations, coffee shops, you name it. Have been out doing that. A lot of those stakeholder meetings, if people called and just said, hey, we'd like to meet with you and have you come talk to our neighborhood or whatever, we did a lot of those. And then we received over 2,800 comments in the alternatives phase. One of the things that we use, and you can see that map on the right, is we used a GIS mapping tool where people could go onto the website. They could go onto the map, they could zoom in as much as they wanted to zoom in, and they could click and drag an icon and then fill in a comment. And what was really helpful for that is then people could see what other people were saying and where they were making those comments. And that was incredibly helpful for us to help refine and understand alternatives better because we had such good location specific comments. That was a really great tool. We'll be using that going forward as well. Next slide. Just this, we jokingly talked about this funnel about how we kind of go from taking all that broad information that we have all the way up at scoping, and then it comes into as we get alternatives start to develop, as we hear from the public, and then we have 2 levels of screening that we've gone through. Level 1 screening is just checking to see, does these things meet the purpose and need? Do they meet the really the most basic criteria? And then as we get all that public input, we then start applying some engineering, seeing if all those thoughts and ideas from the public work. And then that, as we apply the engineering, it helps us do what we call level 2 screening. So we're through both level 1 and level 2 screening, as we're now coming to bring to people the draft environmental impact statement. So you can see all that tons of work of from building the alternatives all the way to refining those alternatives and trying to come out with now what we call the draft environmental impact statement. Anything you want to add on screening, Shane, or?
No, I think you hit it all. I guess maybe just big picture wise, the two presentations prior to us would start prior to this. They would be up in that bigger part of the funnel, right? With the vision, the imagined and the vision, and now we're off into a very project specific look at things. But my point of that is that this project came from one of those planning efforts. It didn't come from something out of the blue. It came from an effort just like Alex walked through, only in this case it was highways and not transit.
Next slide there.
Did it move?
No, it did. Yep. Okay. And so we have the draft release that we really just encourage everybody to go to the website, go to the URL we have up on the screen right there. That's going to be the place where you can get the most information. You can make it's the most effective way to make comments. You can also use that GIS mapping tool and drop in comments. So really just encourage people to go to that website when we have the release. So our public comment period, so that release, we're looking at September 29th. So it's coming up here quickly. And then we'll go into our comment period that will last all the way through to November 13th. So there's the different ways that people can participate is you can definitely come to our open houses. You can see down below on that screen right there that we'll have we'll have a virtual open house like we did before at Alternatives, and that'll be on October 16th. And then October 17th and 18th, people can come in person. There'll be an open house format like we've had before, but there will also be the additional public hearing component. If people want to come into the microphone and share their thoughts or sit down with the court reporter, they can do that. That first one on the 17th will be at the State Fair Park at the Bonneville building there. And then on the 18th, that one will be held at the South Davis Rec Center, which is where we held it back in Alternatives. And then, of course, people can go online and they can use the website. They can send us an email. They can even, if they want to mail us directly with old school mail, they can do that as well. Next slide. And actually, let me, Shane, do you mind going back one more? One thing I wanted to just touch on real quick, something we've done to try to improve participation is something we did alternatives, and we're absolutely going to do now as well as for those open houses. We're providing free transportation. So if somebody needs a voucher or anything to be able to get free transportation to come to it, or if they need to take a Zoom or an Uber or what's the other one?
Lyft.
Lyft, thanks. If you want to take one of those, we can help provide that transportation. One of the things we've also been doing, we realize that for some people to come, that means that maybe they're not able to provide food for their family that night. And so we've also been providing meals at these in-person open houses. And so we'll continue to do that. We've had great experience with food trucks with those. We've also been providing what we call a kids corner, so that there's a place where the kids can go and play and do things and learn a little bit about transportation while their parents can go and be able to participate in those meetings. We've also been doing a lot of stuff in Spanish as well, and we will have Spanish interpreters at the open houses. And then a lot of our collateral also it's in Spanish and English. And then just lastly here here's our phone number, our hotline. People can call that at any time if they want to schedule to meet with us or have any questions. That email address, they can also send their comments or reach out for help. The website I mentioned earlier, or a great way to follow and know what's going on is through this Facebook link as well.
Well, fantastic. I normally would want to have, a little bit of question and answer. We are running long, and our next presenter does need to quit or does need to hop off in about 20 minutes. So instead of kind of opening that up, I apologize for anybody who did have any questions, but he already put that slide up at the end on how to get a hold of you guys. We'll be sure to share that as part of the end presentation. I apologize to anybody who was hoping to hop on, but just out of respect for our next speaker, I am going to kind of take charge and say we're going to go ahead and move on. So thank you very much for the presentation. And let's go ahead and move on to our next speaker. So we have Dan Strong. I apologize, we thought Jason was going to be on, but we do have Dan, who is the president of the West Side Coalition. Dan, you're muted, but I will go ahead and pass off to you if you have anything you want to present. Otherwise, we just want to hear a little bit about the West Side, the impact of I-15, some of the things that you're working on, some of the things that you guys need and want and are hopeful for transit here on the west side of Salt Lake and really just the west side of the valley. So Dan, I'll go ahead and pass off to you. Time is yours.
Great, thank you. It's good to be here and been an interesting presentation so far. So thanks everyone, the other speakers as well. I will start by introducing what the West Side Coalition is and what we do. Some of you may not be familiar with us. We've been around a long time, but we're sort of recently restructured. So getting a little more engaged in things like this than we have been historically. So the West Side Coalition is, we represent and advocate for the health, safety, and quality of life of all West Side residents and people who live and work here on the West Side. So if you live or work in the West Side, you are a member of the West Side Coalition. Our board of directors includes the 6 community council chairs for the 6 neighborhoods in West Salt Lake City. So Fair Park, Poplar Grove, Rose Park, Glendale, Jordan Meadows, West Point, so those 6 folks, and then each community council also appoints a second person to our board, so that gets us to 12. And then there's 6 at-large members, and I'm one of those as well. I live in Rose Park. I've lived in Rose Park for, I guess over 10 years, 12 years now. Former chair of the Rose Park Community Council, so I've got a fairly long history in this arena. It's not an exaggeration to say that the expansion of I-15 that's being proposed and I-15 in general is probably the biggest issue on our plate right now as the West Side Coalition, and that's really saying something because we got a lot on our plate, as you probably know from reading the news with the inland port and the Great Salt Lake and air quality issues and a lot of other things coming our way. But I do want to focus on the freeway because I think it is our biggest focus, at least in the immediate future. And I'm going to kind of walk you through the history of the West Side's relationship to the freeway, some of the more recent impact and some of the trends that we feel it's playing into, and then just kind of more very recent history about this particular project and our involvement. So, and I'm sorry I don't have a slideshow. I just kind of put some thought into this and do my best to cover it. stream of consciousness. But I
You
think
are absolutely fine.
yeah, that's all right. I think I-15 is historically kind of the original sin, not to paint with too broad a brush, but that separated East and West Salt Lake City. And we all know, if you live here, that there is separation between East and West, and there's a lot of disparities between East and West. And I'm not just saying that as a, I know we all kind of like to complain about the problems in our own neighborhood, but there's a lot of objective data to show those disparities, including most recently an EPA assessment that we were partners in that really dove into the data on the environmental gaps between East and West. And it really all goes back to the decision to kind of run the freeway through these neighborhoods and split those two places. And prior to that, Rose Park was thought of very differently than it was after that. And I think we're doing our best to try to get things back to a place of more equity, but that freeway is the biggest divider and obstacle we face. Since then, since kind of that original sin, we've seen a long trend towards industrialization of these West Side neighborhoods. Again, historically in Salt Lake City, there were residential neighborhoods like anywhere else, but as the city grew, there needed to be more and more infrastructure and industrial infrastructure somewhere near the city. And really all of that, almost all of it, has come to the West Side. So we have the airport, of course, we have the railroads that we've already talked about a bit today, the freeway, Rocky Mountain Power, and other the refineries. And it's not just the I-15 freeway. We also, you look at kind of the neighborhoods, Rose Park and Fair Park are really surrounded by a belt of freeways, I-80, I-215, I-15, and kind of all around us. And so all of these things, they contribute to a trend towards making these neighborhoods more industrial and less residential. And that's been true for decades, but it has accelerated even more recently with all of those kind of longstanding infrastructure expanding. So we have a bigger airport now. We're talking about a bigger freeway. Rocky Mountain Power added some really massive power pole infrastructure on the West Side recently. And of course, the inland port has been greenlit. That's bringing more warehousing and transportation trucks, et cetera, to our neighborhood. And then, all of that is why we petitioned the EPA for a study to kind of tell us, like, where are we today? How bad is it? And I think everybody here knows, and University of Utah's done a lot of great work, where you can kind of find this data out there if you look to show, the impacts that we face on the West Side. But the EPA effort was a chance to kind of compile that all in one place and get, an organization with that level of repute to confirm with data what the situation is. And their report was released just a couple weeks back. We did the community engagement portion of that report. So we had a lot of neighborhood meetings to try to get kind of a qualitative view from people who live here about the things they've seen and the way they've been impacted individually. And then EPA contracted with SKIO, which did kind of the more data-driven piece. And together, you really do get a picture of, both the reality of again, the worse air quality and the transit needs, et cetera, on the West Side, and then the individual stories of how those things have impacted people's lives. So those are going up on our website. They're still being finalized, so I can't send you the link for those right now, but they'll be up soon. And I encourage everybody to read that. So that's kind of the bird's eye view of the last, I guess, 50, 60 years of West versus East stuff. The impact of all that, as I can speak someone who lives here and speaks with people who live here very often, is that people really feel, beat up by all of this. And there's a feeling kind of hopelessness at times where it feels like just one thing after another. And I mean, I know that the folks driving the freeway expansion didn't set out to target the West Side, that this is a product of kind of historical trends and where things are and where they need to go. And I'm the first person to say, like, I hate being a NIMBY, when we're talking about things that we all need as a city and as a state that we need to be working together towards. I really want to be a partner in those things. And I know that, like, sometimes people raising their voice for their own neighborhoods and trying to keep things exactly as they are forever is a unnecessary and counterproductive approach to growth and change. And, there are areas where we really have tried to be advocates for the right type of change. One of those is housing, where we would love to see more people here, not fewer people here. And that includes, adding density to our neighborhoods. So I hope if I'm complaining now, I hope it's legitimate reasons for it. And to kind of give you a sense of what that is, we feel that there's a bit of a vicious cycle problem here. I'm cognizant that the EIS Presentations that were just mentioned are all coming up in October, in November, and so basically in the next month. At that same time, we're facing our other, priority number 2 issue, which is school closures. And, it's priority number 1 for many, but those are the 2 big things coming our way. And it's interesting as I'm engaged in both those discussions to see how they feed each other. So one of the West Side elementary schools slated for at least being studied for closure is near the freeway. And many folks think that part of that reason that one's on the chopping block is because of freeway expansion in part. And there's many factors, but that's one part. Another part driving the entire school closure discussion is the loss of residents on the West Side and the loss of children in Salt Lake City in general. And, I'm aware from following this history and these discussions that the industrialization I'm talking about is partly what causes people to leave. So it's kind of like we have the industrialization of these neighborhoods, they get more industrial, less residential. And so residents leave or don't move here or don't bring their kids here, which fuels loss of resources like schools. And then when those things go away, more residents leave, which then makes this a better target for industrialization, and it just feeds and feeds and feeds. So I am interested in trying to break that cycle. And I think the way we do that is hopefully by making these neighborhoods safer, more friendly, and have superior or better environmental quality, better access to transit, better access to public social infrastructure needs like daycare. And if we build it, they will come, I guess is a theme for the day. But if we have those resources in place, more people will move here, more people will stay here. And that will let us to do things like keep our schools. It will also help us better advocate for ourselves in discussions like this one. Because, I'm aware that we, part of kind of being a disadvantaged neighborhood means a lot of the folks here who really do care about these things don't have the time or resources to be as involved as they might like. So that's kind of where we are and how we feel about all of this. So that all brings us to today and the I-15 issue, at present, kind of at its most direct now. And I will say I appreciate the efforts that the prior group presented on as far as their efforts to engage the community. I have felt that when we asked for a meeting or for a presentation or a town hall, that those requests were honored quickly, and that we did have a really great turnout at those as well. So that's all good. If I can communicate kind of the desires and hopes of my neighbors, people don't want the expansion. I mean, that's the bottom line of all this. There have been prior expansions, or when the Olympics happened and their houses were removed then. And I think people's feeling is that if we don't change something at some point, we're going to be doing this again in another 20 years. And each time we do it, it will potentially eat further away at our neighborhoods and continue to contribute to that cycle I mentioned until, do we really have a meaningful residential neighborhood anymore? With these things just keep going endlessly. When we talk about transit, and I'm not an expert on public transit like a lot of the people in this room are, and not everyone on my board is either, but I guess it's difficult for us to believe that there is not a better solution for moving people through, from Farmington and Davis County areas to work in Salt Lake City than expanding the freeway. I understand that part of the project contemplates improved public transit, and we're really in favor of those parts. But it kind of feels like the message we're being given is that there's no alternative to expanding the freeway. Nothing will help besides expanding the freeway. And I just think we find that really difficult to believe. And with that said, I know that, the folks planning the highways maybe aren't the same folks planning public transit, and maybe there needs to be more upfront work. And anyway, but just if I can communicate kind of the beliefs and the attitudes that you may face with folks in this neighborhood, we just, we've all seen other cities that grew and it eventually reached a point where vehicles were impractical. I mean, I've lived in some of those cities like San Francisco, and traffic is bad, but they also have the BART, and they have other good public transit. And I think Salt Lake City's at a point where we have to have some difficult conversations about what the future is going to look like. And are we going to continue in this model of kind of mainly being a vehicle city, or are we going to try to really meaningfully address our transit needs in a way that moves more people in public transit, so that we can reach that next level? And I mean, a lot of the cities that have made that transition are the greatest cities in America. So I think we would like to see that. So that's all kind of the top level view. Like, that's why most people, I think all people I've talked to in this neighborhood, really, really don't want the freeway to expand. With that said, I think many of us also acknowledge that this is happening, that this plan is in the works, it's being developed, and in a world where that is the case, we want to be at the table. We want to help be able to tailor this project in ways that will help us address some of those other longstanding impacts that I mentioned. I think we're all cognizant that, you know, simply saying no to everything is not the best way to be partners in those efforts. And so, you know, I'm hoping we can try to strike some kind of balance and be good partners in crafting a solution that, again, in the event that the project does move forward, helps the people on the west side. So what does that look like? Well, first off, I think the current plan of expanding within the existing footprint is huge for us. We would consider that a major win for the west side and for Salt Lake in general. We've heard kind of those commitments and plans in the past, and I'm encouraged to hear them again today. That's something that is absolutely like a red line that for the west side we need that to happen. And I think in the past we've heard that it probably will. So we're really trying to lock in a commitment to expanding within the existing footprint as the freeway runs through Salt Lake City, and not just 4th to 6th South, but, you know, Salt Lake City begins around the golf course in Rose Park and forward. So we don't want to lose houses in Salt Lake City. Number 2 priority for us is more east-west connectivity. As I mentioned, the freeway is sort of the original sin that divided these neighborhoods and drove a lot of the disparities we see today. I think one way we can undo that is with more connectivity between east and west. And I'm encouraged that some of the planning that I've seen does focus on that as a priority, creating more and better ways around and under over the freeway for pedestrians and bicycles and et cetera. So we're in favor of those things. There's maybe some nuance there, and there are some folks who, you know, are wary of having more traffic from the east come right down their street. So I'm trying to navigate that with people and kind of try to have a big picture view. But generally speaking, I think we want more connectivity between East and West Salt Lake City. And then of course, more pedestrian cycling infrastructure on our off ramps. I was engaged in the last big round of changes to the 6th North off ramp. That was after we had a series of pedestrian deaths from automobile collisions. You know, kind of like I mentioned, this neighborhood was conceived before the freeway. So it's in a situation where you have, you know, pretty quiet residential neighborhood and then a freeway just layered really right on top of it. And so when people exit the freeway at 6th North, they're going from freeway speeds directly into a neighborhood. And we saw the impacts of that. And literally people died there somewhat regularly for a long time. The 6th North changes that we had back in, I want to say about 2015, really have helped. And so, you know, I think targeting that intersection, especially for even, you know, better more pedestrian friendly changes like were mentioned in the prior presentation, is a real positive thing. And the other off ramps we're talking about as well, you know, just again, simple, more biking, more pedestrians, kind of build the off ramps, especially for people and not just for vehicles. So that all brings me to kind of how to get involved. The West Side Coalition is participating in it with another group called the People Against Freeways Coalition that they have streets representation from Salt Lake. And so that's one group that you could reach out to. I don't unfortunately have their website with me, but I can get that to you. And then of course the West Side Coalition is its own separate entity, and sometimes with differing views from that group. I would say that we support, you know, kind of the big picture messaging of that group, but they may be taking maybe a more extreme stance on this than we would like to. And so there's maybe some degree of separation there that we're still kind of navigating. But the West Side Coalition itself is a place where, you know, we'd love to have any partners at the table. You can go to westsideslc.org to find out where we meet and what we'll be doing. We have a candidate forum with 3 mayoral candidates coming up on September 26th at the Fair Park. And then I guess I would say, you know, you all have your own voices and organizations, and we'd really appreciate you to just continue to use your own resources to push state leaders for different and better visions of how we can accommodate growth in our neighborhoods. The West Side has borne the brunt of Salt Lake City's growth for most of the city's history, and we're not against growth, but we want to be smart about it, and we want to use these opportunities of, you know, more people kind of investing in the West Side to try to undo some of those unfortunate historical impacts on our neighborhoods. So yeah, join us in that. Educate yourselves a little bit if you can on the history of things, and let's try to use this momentum we have. There's a lot of federal money coming for environmental improvement and for east-west connectivity. We'd love to have a lot of that focused on Salt Lake. If we're going to have things like the inland port and the freeway expansion, the airport expansion, and more rail, et cetera, on the west side, well, we need to find ways to bring that don't further exacerbate the impacts I've talked about, and that hopefully undo some of them. So projects like the Rio Grande plan that this group's probably aware of to take railroad infrastructure and put it underground. We love things like that can bring and accommodate more growth, but do it in a way that doesn't hurt people as much. So with all that said, I'm happy to take any questions. I do have a couple more minutes, but thank you for trying to accommodate my schedule. I appreciate it.
I suppose I do have a question for you, just really quick. So some of the improvements that we have seen on the west side, for example, is the 20's Plenty project, as well as increased emphasis on bike lanes and bike infrastructure. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on, first of all, the 21's Plenty program, its implementation and success, and then kind of, are there further improvements you'd like to see the bike network? Are there further improvements you'd like to see to the pedestrian network and the transit network on the west side specifically?
Sure. Yeah. So a big fan of 20's Plenty. I'm also a big fan, and not everyone in my neighborhood is, but personally, at least, a big fan of the bicycle additions, especially on 9th West, where that went from a 4-lane to a 2-lane street with good bike lane. I use that all the time. And I haven't noticed any significant problems with the traffic when that changed. I will say, like, as a somebody kind of at the West Side Coalition level, we're a little farther removed from people in individual neighborhoods than like a community council, and that is a blessing and a curse in some ways. We do a harder time driving engagement, but we're also able to take like a more holistic, big picture view of things like changes to individual streets and neighborhoods. And I've observed in my time doing community advocacy that people are afraid of change, and for good reason. I mean, I kind of talked about like a lot of the changes that have come to the west side have not been that great for people. And so there's a real skepticism when you talk about things like changing speed limits, changing roadways, adding bicycle infrastructure. People think that things are going to get worse. Generally speaking, our team and our vision for transit is focused on people, not vehicles, and in areas where those interests don't align completely, and I think they usually can, but in areas where they don't, we favor making these neighborhoods more walkable and more bikeable. 700 North, there's a plan right now to rethink 700 North that Salt Lake City's working on, and we kind of see that same debate playing out now. Like there's some folks who are like, well, I use that, I need to get to work, and I need to get to work quickly, and I don't want to see it lose traffic lanes. Our perspective is that we want that to be a vibrant public street. Some of the plans we've seen allow a median in the center that could be activated for things like block parties and flea markets and things like that. We're excited about things like that. We want people to be able to walk there comfortably, get to the grocery stores that are on that street. So that's one. Sorry, as far as other needs, the biggest thing that people complain about rightfully in the west side is the railroad situation. You wait 20 minutes sometimes while a train just sits there. And if we're going to see more rail and coming for the inland port, we need to find a way to get people across those crossings without just sitting there.
Hey, I've got a real quick question for you. Have you used the route number 1 or the 205 bus?
I have not. Billy Palmer is our transit expert, and he's much more involved with actually like riding public transit than I've been. I'm fortunate to work at the Capitol complex, which I can bike to, so I'm usually biking. But yeah,
you get a pass on that. You're okay.
Thanks.
All right.
I love
do
you.
you have any other questions?
You think I should know about it, but thank you. Yeah.
All right. Well, I know you had a kind of a hard stop, so I don't want to keep you any much longer, but thank you very much for your time, Dan. I really do appreciate it. And we'll be sure to share contact information both for the local community councils and the West Side Coalition in general to help people get involved if they're listening in after the fact. So Dan, thank you very much again.
I appreciate the time. Thank you.
All right. All right. Well, so I do want to wrap up. We just have a couple of housekeeping items at this point, just to go through really quick. I do want to do our call to adjourn and just our call to action. So the single biggest thing that I really want to draw everyone's attention to is the fact that we are going to be having, again, our annual convention, which will be coming up on October 21st. October 21st is your opportunity to run for office as a board member, to get placed on the board. It is also your opportunity to kind of meet and discuss about the future of UTRU and what are some of the projects and things that we should be focusing on. It will also hopefully be an opportunity for you to meet with people to start setting up local chapters. Hey, I see that you're in this area. Hey, I see you're in this area. We have the same vision about this transit option that we care about. We want to be sure that we're facilitating those conversations and helping to build those items up. Last thing, I would be remiss if I didn't say that we do always need fundraising as well. Easiest way to do that is through just becoming a dues paying member. I know I explained the process a little bit before, but in order to vote for board members, you must be a dues paying member. That is the one requirement, just to help continue to support the organization. In order to vote for anybody running for office, you need to have paid dues by 10 a.m. the day of the convention, so on the 21st. So, and it does need to be a monthly contribution, or it can be like the lump sum, however you want to do that. And so please do get involved with that. As a side note, we have like stickers and stuff like that that we can give you as kind of a thanks for doing that. We're happy to have those sent out. I wish I should have thought about it and I should have put it up there. I didn't get that on there, but yeah, we have a couple stickers and all that good stuff. So please do give that involvement. It's an honor system as far as what your daily ride is per month. We'll take your word for it. Biggest thing is just help us support so that we can do the work that we do to help reach out into those communities. But with that, we are over on time by a little bit. I was hoping to wrap up by about 11:30. But just by way of wrapping it up, we will be posting this on YouTube as well as having contact information. If anybody wants to reach out, just go to utru.org, UTRU.org. To reach me personally, it is curtis.haring, curtis.haring at utru.org. But with that, we're going to go ahead and call it a meeting. Thank you to our speakers again. We'll be sure to put everything together, and we will give you the rest of your day back. Thank you for your time, everyone.